everybody who is joining us. We have Dr. Black, and we will be going over system mapping, and I'm super excited. So I'm here, and she's joining us via Zoom because, all right. Oh, okay, and we've got about 10 people on. Hellos. We'll be checking for questions throughout, so feel free to leave questions as we talk.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you have the journal or if you have questions or comments or feedback, especially about the how to get started portion. I'd love to see if there's anything that people have feedback on so that we can add to things or I can change things in the journal. Jenna, do you think that we should go through the parts profiles any more than what we did last time? Or was there anything that you feel like we missed or anything like that?
I think we did a fairly good job on the parts profiles. Just as an overview, they're wonderfully detailed. Like in the questions that you put, because like sometimes you just don't know what to put down, and the journal can seem overwhelming. Period, just the blank pages. So having things like just inner alliances and conflicts. Yes, absolutely, inner alliances, inner conflicts, and just having that prompt is so helpful. Yeah. So yeah, they're wonderfully detailed.
Well, good. Well, and we talked about the daily tracker, and we talked about the trigger tracker. Should we talk about the for the body section and then save the system mapping for afterwards? Because I think we could just go on and on about system mapping.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I think that'd be great. Do the for the body and then just spend the rest of the time in system mapping.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So there's a whole section in the journal that is just for the body. And that was a strategic decision that I made working with some of the clients that I have, because somatic or physical dissociation is a very common thing with dissociative disorders. And then there are people that may meet criteria for conversion disorder or functional neurological disorder, or they may have functional seizures or psychogenic non-epileptic seizures or things like that. And so it's not uncommon to have physical symptoms with a dissociative disorder. And I've got a couple of clients that fit into that kind of criteria of having either PNES, the psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, or having somatic symptoms related to dissociation. So it's not uncommon to have, maybe numbness or unexplained pain, or there may be a part of the system that has some sort of medical condition or medical issue that another part of the system doesn't feel or doesn't experience. And it's just another way that we see that parts have different compartmentalized abilities or disadvantages or troubles or things like that. So I didn't want to neglect the body, because you could even think about the body as another part of the system, another piece of the puzzle that needs to be worked with.
When I started thinking about the body as a nonverbal system member, I got a lot better at caring for it, and realized how bad I'd been at caring for it up to that point. So yeah, and I have had, just to touch on, I've had a couple people ask me about is it PDS, the
PNES?
Yes, the seizures.
Yeah.
And ask about the connection with that and D.I.D. in various videos. I've had more than one person ask about it. And so if you want to speak on that, I know there are people who want that information.
Yeah, so PNES stands for psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, or you can call them functional seizures. They're basically seizure-like activity that occurs in the body. It can look like an absentee seizure, grand mal seizure, different manifestations. And the body reacts like it is having a seizure, and it looks very real, but it's not from neurological causes. So it's not caused from epilepsy. There's not that neurological basis for it. And so it's like a functional manifestation of psychological things. And a lot of the times doctors are really terrible at explaining this. ER doctors in particular, or, somebody that you would encounter at the hospital that doesn't maybe specialize in this area, can be really insensitive. And the way they say things can come off as if people are just making things up, or they're, trying to manipulate or get attention or things like that. And that's not the case at all, or it's all in your head. And I have to tell clients that have come in for this, it technically is in your head, but not like what the doctor is saying or making you feel. It is a physical manifestation of psychological things, of psychological pain or suffering or troubles or things like that. So I like to think about it as like a panic attack for the body. That a lot of times people that suffer from PNES or conversion disorder symptoms or things like that, they struggle with expressing their feelings. They can't name their feelings. They're disconnected from themselves. They have a lot of stressors. They don't have a way of dealing with it. They have like a high need for perfection. And so they just don't allow themselves to emote, which is pretty common in dissociative disorders, right? And so I've been quite taken by the amount of people that there's like this strong correlation to dissociative disorders, and medical doctors don't necessarily assess for that or look for that. You can have PNES or conversion disorder, but not meet the criteria for a dissociative disorder. And you can have PNES and not have a reported history of trauma, although the incidences of people with PNES having a history of trauma is very high. And then there's, of course, like you don't remember if you have trauma, maybe. So there's there needs to be a lot of screening for dissociative disorders, because it can be like another manifestation of this type of somatic dissociation, or it could be just, a conversion disorder where you don't meet the criteria for a dissociative disorder. They're definitely treatable, and a lot of mindfulness and a lot of grounding and a lot of similar techniques that I use for dissociation or dissociative disorders have been really helpful and effective for other clients. So,
and I want to add on to where you were saying that doctors can really not know how to approach this. I had someone in my life who was going to the doctor for probably some conversion disorder things, but then turned into a very bad episode of CRPS. And the doctor was like, I just think you need a therapist. It was very dismissive, and she was in terrible pain, like invisible, like with the CRPS, her arm was swollen and red. And just because there wasn't a physical thing that they could point to as here's the origin of your disorder didn't mean that it was imaginary, which I think a lot of people, when they're like, it's in your head, think it's imaginary. It's not imaginary at all. And it's not under the people's control, but doctors often don't do a good job of explaining that.
Yeah. Does that friend have a dissociative disorder?
No, but they do have complex trauma. And so, they did what you were talking about. So they learned identifying your emotions, grounding, stress relieving, lots of stress relieving techniques. And it was a rough go for a couple years, but it's now like mostly like sometimes there will be background flare-ups, but it's no longer like debilitating pain.
Yeah, and that's another thing, like I've seen some connection to like CRPS and things like that. So there's just this mind-body connection that we don't fully understand. And the field of, helping professions is dissociated in itself. I mean, we all stay in our own little areas and we don't have expertise in that area necessarily. And so if you don't have a client that kind of, or multiple clients that, experience these issues, or you don't have education, then you miss it. I do wish that the medical profession could deliver those things in a more palatable way so that people don't feel like they're just imagining it or making it up or looking for attention. A lot of times your body manifests psychological things. There is no way to separate the mind and the body. Just like if you're stressed, you can feel sick to your stomach. If you're sick all the time, you can become stressed. So there's just no separating them. So as far as the section, I noticed with clients that have dissociative disorders, a lot of the times there were parts of the system that, were not on board with taking medications, or they didn't understand why the medication was supposed to be beneficial, or I don't have that problem, so I don't need to take that medication. And then of course, with loss of time or things like that, you may not remember if you took your medicine, then you're taking it inconsistently, and then it's not giving you the therapeutic benefits that it could be giving you. And so there were lots of conversations with clients about that of, what is your medication, first of all? Do you understand the importance of this medication? And the other thing, and just even with like non-dissociative clients, providing psychoeducation on taking your medication at the frequency that the doctor prescribes. So like, for example, Buspar has a short half-life, which basically means that in X amount of time, half of the medication will have dropped out of your system so that it's no longer at therapeutic levels, if I understand that correctly. So since it has a short half-life, you have to take it more frequently. And so a lot of times Buspar is prescribed at least twice a day. That's because it has a 12-hour half-life. And if you don't take it twice a day, you're not getting the therapeutic benefit of it. And so then you need to be aware of that. And if the system is aware of that, then it will help with medication compliance or getting the full benefit from it, because otherwise, it could be throwing you off. And then there's sometimes meds where some person can take a particular med with food, or another person needs to take the same medication without food, or it's okay to take certain meds in the evening, but other people, it can keep them up. And so they need to take it in the morning. And so this is a place to kind of talk about that.
I
and then
love, like you were saying, if the alters don't understand why, they're not going to do it. So
yes,
having it laid out so that you can write how this helps the body, like you said, why we take it at these times or this frequency, because some alters get a rap for sabotaging when they're not trying to. They just don't understand, or actively think this thing isn't helping. So having it laid out really helps everybody to be a team.
Yeah, or I don't have the problem. I don't need those meds. Yeah, okay, you're right. You're right. You don't have that problem, but so-and-so over here does. So if you're out, if you could, check the timer, the reminder that we can set up, and then you can take the meds, and then so-and-so will be feeling better, and you won't be so angry and frustrated with them because they're, getting their butt out of bed, and that's what you want, right? Help me help you.
No, let's
So,
see if we have any comments so far. Oh, hi, JC. Um, let's see. She says, thanks for listening, letting us on here to listen into this. Yes, medication is a struggle. Absolutely.
and there's lots of space in there to write about different medications. I have some clients that have, a longer list of meds, or there's a couple of medication lists. So let's say you only take like 3 meds. You could just put the date in the margin. And then if you have a med change, you could put the date in the margin. And that is also a great part of tracking too, is because especially with like mood changes or sleep, appetite, the things that you're trying to manage with your meds, or that you're trying to manage just anyways, it's good to sit back and like help your medical provider or your mental health provider to track, when did you start this, and when was the onset of this problem, or is the problem getting better, that type of thing. Because there are some meds that will just downright not work for a client, depending on the person's makeup and condition and obstacles and things like that. And so it's really good to be able to write the date and to be able to reflect on when everything was going down. And then there's a whole section that's just specifically about journaling around the body. And so it says, describe medical conditions, issues, concerns that you would like each part to better understand, so that all parts may work together. And it's just an organized place to put it there. There are people that can have a medical condition like high blood pressure or high cholesterol or food intolerance or things like that, but another part of the system does not. And so then that part may, it could be silly things like lactose intolerance.
Yes.
Right? A part that doesn't have lactose intolerance and that's just drinking, chugging milk and eating ice cream and all things, and then another part's paying for it.
Yes.
Which is unpleasant. Or
for us, what we run into a lot is we have alters who are night owls, except that we don't sleep really well, and then we have to get up early. So to put in there, remember, we don't sleep well. You have to get us in bed by this time, or else the body will suffer the whole next day. For anybody.
Right. And so like we share a body, and unfortunately, I know a lot of parts would like to just have their own body and do their own thing, but the body is shared. And so this is what the body needs. The body needs to eat. Like who's going to be in charge of that? Or, you got to check your blood pressure, check your blood sugar, or it's not uncommon for there to be struggles with like weight gain or weight loss or body image issues. And so helping different parts of the system that are stuck in older times or that are struggling is a really good way to help get them on board with treating the body nicely. And so like if a person has gained weight to avoid being harmed, then other parts of maybe still acting in that survival response, even though the person's an adult and is trying to lose weight because it's going to be better for their health, or vice versa. Body image issues. I mean, eating troubles are not uncommon for people that have dissociative disorders. And so it's a space to be able to provide that, where I guess when any part is ready, maybe there's a part that helps to orient and to update and is like the information provider, then they can take this part that's now ready to kind of go to this section and review what's in there and process through it. And that's just another way of being effective in the system, is having the system to do the work. So instead of like, you know, you said that you've just now gotten into therapy with a therapist that knows how to work with dissociative disorders. This is a big difference in and having a therapist that specializes in this area. Is we train and help coach the system to meet the needs for the system, so that the system can do that in between sessions and when the therapist is not around. Because I don't want to foster my client being dependent on me. I want to foster their own independence and their own growth. And then when they come into session and they tell me what they've done and that they were able to update a part or work through something, I'm like, look at that. Look what you did. You did that all on your own. You didn't even need me. You know what to do. And then you have that ownership of your own healing and your own progress and all the things.
Yeah, and it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think that's really working together as a team is a good way to segue into system mapping. Before we do, I'm going to check if there's any comments on the last thing. Oh, and JC asked, and I think she was speaking about the I'm not going to remember this, seizures, the non-physical seizures.
Oh, the term is psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, or they may be called functional seizures, or
yes, functional
neurological disorder, or conversion disorder, which conversion disorder is the older term for it.
Okay.
And you can have conversion disorder or functional neurological disorder, but not have the seizures. You can have some other manifestation.
Yeah, I have some conversion disorder symptoms, but not the seizures. But I know that it's common among my viewers. And I think, like you said, just not being able to communicate trauma. The thing where they say it's all in your head, you know, the little 3 pounds of gray electrified meat that's running your entire body, that's where the problem is. Oh, yeah. Oh, good. It's just not the entire control center for everything. That's good.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it's in the control center.
Yeah.
That holds all the memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It runs everything. Yep.
Bodies hold the memories and all the things. So system mapping. Yeah.
Super excited.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you that the way I conceptualize system mapping is purely from a therapist standpoint, where my standpoint is focused on helping me and the client to understand what the current makeup is, what the current obstacles are, and to help to develop a strategic plan and to get an overview of what's going on so that I can lead my client strategically in the best course to work with the system and to work out obstacles. So like if there's conflict, or if we're needing to create safety in the system, or if we're needing to work through alliances to make those more beneficial to the system, that is my goal as a therapist. And so when I do system mapping, it's pretty much with that overarching goal. A person that has a dissociative disorder may do like system mapping as a way to be seen or known or felt and understood. There's no right or wrong. It's your journal. You can do whatever you want with it. But when I talk about it, it's going to be probably pretty strategic. So you talked about in your video that you just kind of wrote things out. What were you, I want to hear from you of how you do things, and maybe it could help a client of mine,
Oh,
you know?
absolutely. So for us, the order of like when we know they were active, when they went dormant, and when they emerged was important for like connections. So I have like on mine, I did it verbally, and I know we're going to end up doing it like with images as well, because while I process verbally, other parts of the team definitely process visually. So on mine, I had like show boxes around ones that went together. So these guys went together, but then two go together more. Boxes for separation, lines for showing like fusions, and then also like over here are the relational alters, and then maybe an arrow connecting the two that are in a relationship with each other, and then alters that nobody knew about over here in the basement for forever. And when we do it visually, I think that there will actually be drawing the basement, and like these are the altars that were in the basement, and more of like a at certain ages where the team was. Because had someone was like, did your therapist ask when they formed? No, I don't know when they formed. I can kind of pinpoint when they were active based on how I acted as a child at certain ages, like pictures of me in dresses versus pictures of me in like boy looking clothes. Say, okay, so these altars were active around these ages. So they were there, and then I know when they went dormant, but when they formed, I have no idea. So that's kind of how we graphed it based on when we knew they were active, the roles that they do, and the relationships that they have with each other. And it doesn't look like that, but that's why they're going to make it look like that. But as I was writing it out, I was like, okay, here's how it makes sense to me as an alter.
That's cool. I think there's so many different things that you can get from system mapping, and your map is just going to depend, or your illustration or whatever you put in for that piece of the journal is just going to depend on where you're at and what you're doing and things like that. So for system mapping, I do this with clients a lot of the times, and there are specific techniques that therapists that work with dissociative disorders are trained in order to kind of facilitate figuring things out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I won't tell people those specific techniques, but you can kind of work things for your own system as much as possible. Or you could, if you have a therapist, you can talk to your therapist about this. So what you can do is you can develop a meeting place or a place to like negotiate or to have discussion or whatever the language is that would be good for you. And I help facilitate this using like guided imagery with clients. And we invite all of the parts of the system that want to come to the meeting place to come there. And if a part doesn't want to come, it doesn't have to. They can be out in the hallway, they can be in a different room, things like that. And so then you're not threatening any parts to do anything before they're ready. And then we kind of just illustrate what we see. And so I'm going to make some fake names real quick for my parts I'm putting on here.
I think I actually have one of those exact things. Yep. This was one of the littles, so you'll have to pardon it. And I had some loose pages with the journal. This is one of the loose pages. We have a conference room, and so she was drawing the conference room table. And so there are the chairs around the conference room table, her little viewer for seeing what's happening in the front. So that way, like you were saying, like she doesn't have to participate in what's happening with the front. She can if she chooses. You don't have to come into the conference room. Like that's its own separate place that, like you said, through guided imagery, we set up, and it's been wonderfully helpful. And so when I brought that into the therapist, because it wasn't in therapy that she drew that, she was like, oh, I've noticed how, like, is that like everybody's seat? And then I started counting and I was like, that is the number of active fronters right now. And I didn't even notice that.
Yes. So empty seats are typically not coincidental. And so maybe it's indicative of a part that is in the system, but just doesn't want to be there yet. Or maybe there are seats because seats are needed in between two parts. Like they need a little distance between themselves. And so, yeah, here's my little drawing. I usually gravitate towards the board table. But, and we got a couple of parts around the table. You can see that there is one part that's a little bit more off here. Maybe they're a little standoffish. And then we got the angry part, which I just made up, right? But the angry part's over here, and maybe this is like my entrance or something. And that's pretty telling for you that maybe this angry part is not quite ready to engage. And it gives kind of an insight of this imagery to the client to understand for themselves, but for the therapist to not go mess with parts that don't want to be messed with yet.
Yes.
And then this can be kind of a way to explore the parts and what it is that they need to work on, or what they're struggling with, or how they help, or things like that. And then when you need to make executive decisions, you can ask for whichever parts need to be present to come in the meeting place, and you can have a discussion. And so it's just kind of a formal way of facilitating that internal discussion inside and giving some imagery with it. And the great thing about dissociative disorders is that when you create that imagery, people with dissociative disorders can very well internalize that and utilize it in a very productive way for healing.
It's been
So
really
if there's
in several areas. So go ahead now.
no, you sure?
Yeah.
So I was going to say, like, if a part doesn't want to be present, they could have like a PA system or like a speaker set up so that they can hear, but they can listen from the safety of their own space. And a lot of the times clients that come to counseling, they already naturally have some sort of structure in place for their system. And the structure inside may look like a house or an apartment or, a village. I mean, I was talking with somebody recently and saying, it makes me think of like Dungeons and Dragons or like tabletop games where you have like the land of this or the land of that. And
Small World, Settlers of Catan. Yeah, you've got your little.
Yeah, so there can be systems that are pretty small and pretty organized, or there can be wildly complex systems with parts of a certain variety, and it can be scattered. And so, even when you think about like trying to quiet the system down so that you can go to sleep at night, or so that you can have a moment to think about your decision, all of creating this structure and organization inside is helpful for that, because, like we talked about, like littles don't necessarily need to be out for conflict. If the littles have no place to go, you can create a space for them And it can be a nursery, it can be a castle, it can be a room where they have beds that are theirs. And or it could be like some sort of adventure park or something. It can be whatever it needs to be. You could have your own bedroom, and you could have, you know, a castle to go play in, a playroom. It's okay. But to create that and to illustrate, a lot of times illustrating it can really bring it to life. And it can, and then you can figure out what's missing. And then a therapist can help with ideas, you know, about, well, what if they could have this, or what if you could have the PA system, or you can create a vault inside or a storage room so that traumatic material or things like that can be stored in the vault. And so then your trauma keepers don't just have to hold on to that and feel like crap all the time. They can have a moment of peace too.
And just giving them the idea, a lot of times they then can take it and run with it. So for me, we had, we have, I don't know, a landscape. I don't know how well this will show up. So that's the house. There was individual houses. And one of the interesting things to me about the inner world is that you can create things, but then when the mind changes something, like it can be changed also, like without you realizing it. So there were individual houses, and then we had just a really big healing moment, and all of the houses went away, and there was the big house. So we drew out the basics of where everybody's room was or is, but then we had with the therapist suggestion, we added a conference room. And really that started with her suggesting, and so me visualizing, and then the altars somehow had it added onto the house where everybody's at, separate. And there is, for us, because you were like, you can install whatever's helpful outside of the conference room hall. There is a two-way glass, so people can watch in and listen in without being in. And then there's cool off rooms to the side if people have had enough or got triggered and need to be in a safe place. But what I didn't expect, we were dealing with my traumatic time of year, and I was not coping well. And so I told the therapist, I always struggle. And since this is her first year with me, this is her first season going through it, she said, well, can some of the altars who hold that, can they take that? And where you were suggesting a vault, she was like, can they take that and keep it from you? And I was like, I don't know, but I can ask. And using that conference room, hey, invite the altars who usually hold that. What do you guys think of this? And I hadn't suggested a vault. The therapist hadn't. Just what do you think about, a way to keep this away from me? And we have at the conference room, a computer so people can see the front. And one of the altars just went up, created a file, and stashed the memories in it. And she was like, now, she's like, I've password locked it so we can access it and you can't. And I was like, oh, well, that's a brilliant idea. Does it work? It did work. I could still access the intellectual memory of it. I knew what happened, but the emotional memory was stored away until I got back on my feet, mentally, and could deal with. And so it was an amazing tool that I hadn't any conception of when we set up the conference room, that was something that it could be used for. And the PA system, I needed to get word back to everybody. And normally what I would do is just kind of shout back into the headspace and hope people heard me. Hey, everybody. But we had been doing this conference room visualization, which helped with switching as well, because I could, see myself in the conference room and ask any other alters to come in who might want to switch. Made switching a lot smoother. So I went to the conference room and I was like, hey, I need to get the word out. And one of the alters pushed a little button and was like, okay, this will go to everybody's room in the house. So I was like, are you serious? And really? So I said what I needed to say, and I could feel the information like expanding out into like all the parts. And it was amazing because sharing information is so hard with a dissociative disorder. And I'm like, so wait, you're just telling me we just needed to build this space and then we could all come and cooperate and add like tools into this space. It's been incredible.
I love it. It's the funnest to see clients be like, that's all I had to do. Like,
Right?
it's that easy. Yeah. Like, now you got it. Let's do it. You brought up a good point about like asking another part to take that. And you might say, you might even ask like, could each of the parts take a little piece of this so that it's being shared equally and that no part is being overly burdened with whatever the thing is. But if you put things in the vault, you don't lock them away for forever and never come back to them. And I'm very explicit in that with clients that have dissociative disorders, because that's what dissociation is naturally about, is I'm going to push this away and I'll ignore it and I'll be fine, except for some other part has to hold that. And so the vault is for holding, traumatic material that it's more manageable, it's stored in there, and then we can take it out a little piece at a time and we can work with it. So we are distancing, we're creating distance, but we're not ignoring and we're not like never coming back to it or anything like that.
Yes.
Because if you did that, that would be just more dissociating.
Yes. When we made our locked files, it was with the understanding that once that time of year with all the years had passed, then we would be able to work on processing when we weren't being activated. And I explained it to someone like, it would be like asking a veteran to work on their PTSD during a fireworks display. Like, there's too much going on. My system is too triggered to be able to actively process the issue. So by locking it away, we were then able to be able to say, we'll come back to that when the season's passed. Yeah. And well, having some technical difficulties. There we go.
Sorry about that. I lost you at when we made our locked files.
Yeah. So when we made our locked files, it was with the understanding that we would come back to it when the season was passed. I was comparing it to like a veteran trying to process PTSD during a fireworks display. I'm like, it's just you're too overwhelmed with stimulation. And so we made our locked files with the understanding that once the season's passed, we're going to be working on processing it when it's like not actively triggering so that we can do a better job of it.
Yeah. Someone said until someone decides to slam the door and be like, no talk. Then again, communication takes time. Yeah, you're right. It does take time. And so if you get the door slammed in your face, try as much as you can to be kind and to be empathetic and understanding and be curious about why that part would do that, or maybe why it's not ready to communicate. And just keep trying the best that you can. And maybe it's not ready for a reason. A lot of the times these barriers are in place for a very good reason. And so you don't want to go in there like a wrecking ball and start ripping things down and forcing things that the system's not ready for. And so, there's a phrase that a major therapist has used. I think it's Richard Sheffitz. He's a psychiatrist, I believe, but he says that slow is fast. And so that's something that I want people to remember in doing this work, because you can't just go blazing through all these objectives or all these things. And that's why I say, if there's nothing to put in that spot, that's okay. If you can't, like, even though journaling is great, if you're not in the space for it, or if it's too overwhelming, go use some other coping skill. Like, don't try to force it. Don't try to like force information on parts that aren't ready to put it. Just let it be. And when it's time, that information will come out. And not all parts are formed with the same like specifications, or they're not as detailed as others. So that's why some parts may already have a name and other parts don't.
Yes.
So in therapy, we typically don't encourage naming parts. If they don't have a name, we would just call them like a little girl, or the angry one, or the shadowy one. And that's totally fine, because it's not typically part of our goals in therapy is to go expand on them or detail them more. I always like to date my system maps, mainly for me, and if I am doing that with a client, so that I can see if another part has been added, or it's typically not that there's a new part that's just developed out of thin air. It's that there was a part that didn't show up to the meeting space yet. And so that I like to see how the dynamics change and shift, and what might need to be worked on.
And I think that is a brilliant idea. And I have somebody that I wanted to mention, and well, two actually. So we're going over All Parts Are Welcome for the people who've asked what we're discussing, which is a dissociative living journal for people with dissociative identity disorder. And someone said, creating our inner world makes the imposter syndrome feel worse, which I know a lot of people have asked about having an inner world, creating stuff in the inner world, because it is our tendency as people with D.I.D to feel denial and to be like, nope, this is all just, we've just made this all up. I thought that was an excellent comment.
Yeah, that's very typical. Even people that have been in it for a while, like, are you sure I'm not just bipolar, or are you sure I'm not just imagining this? And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, I can see when you're switching, and it's definitely not imagined. And people that are not dissociative could imagine inner worlds and parts of themselves. They can, like, I can speak figuratively of the part of me that feels this kind of way, or the part of me that wants to do this or that. But it's very different, and it's clearly distinguished from people that have dissociative disorders, because those parts, those dissociative parts of the personality, are felt as separate entities or separate from them, and are not me. That's not me. And so when I speak of my figurative parts, I feel that I have full ownership of them, and I feel that I have full responsibility and connection to those things. Even my angry feelings, or, if I'm jealous, or something that we might not think is maybe the most positive experience, I still feel as if I have ownership over those things. Dissociative parts of the personality are felt as separate, and as if they are not owned by the host or the person or whatever.
When people ask me about like the difference between things like internal family systems and parts and D.I.D parts, usually I mention something exactly like that, where everyone has an inner child. Not everybody's inner child will interrupt what they're doing and ask them for cookies. It's like you're actively doing something, not at all thinking about something, and all of a sudden your inner child's like, this is boring. I would like to color and have cookies, please. Like normally with parts work, with most people, you go and you ask your inner child, like you've gone and created this space. Your inner child isn't a separate person interrupting what you're doing in your own thoughts, just others' thoughts, to
Yes.
their desires.
Yes. Yeah, my inner child, when I go shopping for my kids for toys, I'm like, I want that. Like,
Yes.
I didn't get to have that when I was a kid. That's not fair. Let's get that. And I want to get it for the kids. You know, I'm not like blacking out and buying it and taking it home for myself or anything, which would probably be a good old time. But so
You're liable for that purchase, Hubs. It wasn't me.
it's for the kids.
Right, that's right.
So, I mean, as far as system mapping, I love how you kind of illustrated the inside of the house. You can totally do that. You can do inside of the house. You can do like if there's a space for each of the parts, you could do the rooms, you could do, or like the castle, the playroom, the recreational center. Like if you have a part that is angry and needs like a boxing room or a rage room, I've helped parts create rage rooms.
I can see
And
the rage room coming in our house. I have a couple parts who would make good use of it.
yeah, and then you can, like, if you have child parts that are triggered by the angry parts, you can soundproof the nursery or the children's room. And then you can have a soundproof rage room.
I'm not gonna lie. When we got
They
this,
can get that out.
my system was most excited about the system mapping blank pages because they were like, we're going to draw each of our rooms and each of the things that like are important to us. And having that space just to be able to put it down like physically somewhere was really exciting to just about everybody in my system. And we've got, I say only, we've gotten like 3 pages in, but they've put a lot of care into what we did. And then each part has requested like them doing their own room. I want to draw my room. I'm going to draw my room. Nobody draws my room. Okay, nobody draws your room. And it's actually been a source of a lot of system communication, just having these blank pages for them to be able to express their parts of the system in.
Yeah, and it's all about creating comfort and communication, like safety as much as possible, as much as that wants to be received. And if there's something missing, like that's when you figure out like, oh, I need a PA system.
Yes.
Oh, I need a vault. Oh, I need a rage room.
True.
Yeah. And then you can provide it. And then that ultimately creates more comfort for all of the parts. That part that needs to rage gets their outlet, and the parts that can't handle the rage get their peace.
Yes.
And then
that reminded me that I brought my plug over, but did not plug in my computer, and I've been using a lot of video, so I better do that. There we go. And whoop, don't mind the loud arthritic kitty in the background.
I love Siamese because they're so talkative.
They are. They will let you know how they feel about a thing.
Yes. Yes. So I wonder if there's any other questions or anything like that from anybody.
People have been very, very chatty. So let me scroll back up. Oh, nice guitars. Thank you. They are the Hubs. He plays, and he plays really well. Like I'm jealous of his musical abilities. Someone says making a conference room feels facade-ish, and yes, it does. at first, like when you're like, I'm going to go in and construct something in this world that belongs to the altars, except that it belongs to you too. And it's incredibly helpful. Like it
It
has,
doesn't have to, yeah, it doesn't have to be a conference room. It can be a living room.
yes, this
It can
is,
have couches in it. It can have a board table. It could be like an outdoor atrium where
ooh,
you get together and chit chat.
yeah.
Yeah, like if parts don't want to feel confined, that's cool. Let's make a picnic table outside that's like long enough for all of the parts.
Yes.
Whatever you want to do.
Um, Someone said, we still haven't figured out how to build in our inner room. We seem to discover more than we create. I mean, and maybe if you don't actively know which part can build in the inner world, you can put a request in, and then next thing you know, you discover a conference room in the inner world. Because I know it can be tricky within the system to know who has what ability.
Well, and typically there's something there already. And
Yes,
so you're not constructing from
from
a
that.
complete white void.
Yes,
You're constructing like you're updating, you're remodeling, you're adding some revisions and you know putting things that the parts want. Like they want a space to be able to be heard.
yes.
They want a space to feel relaxed. They want a way to have some separation from the other parts or
To be able to
to,
express anger without scaring any of the other parts.
yeah. So check in and be like, what would you like? Because that's what I do. I don't go in there and tell my clients parts like this is what you need. I'm like, what do you need?
Yes,
What do you want? Okay, how about this? How about a rage room? How about, you know, a place that you can go box or, and I think about what the client likes and then usually try to help offer that.
yes,
And I offer options and see what is received. And if nothing's received, okay, you can think about it. And that's the other thing. Like, do you want a room? Well, this part wants a room, but this part doesn't. Okay, cool. Well, we can help build a room for this part. And this other part here can watch and see what it's all about. And if they decide they want one too, they can have one. And if they don't, that's okay. So you're not pressuring or forcing or doing anything like that.
yes. We had a
So
cave in our inner world because one part refused to move into the house, absolutely refused. And we suggested, well, you should have a space of your own, like something that's for you. And they were like, fine. And they, like, next time I had awareness of it, they had a cave. And I was like, okay, I mean, you're welcome in the house anytime you want, but you don't have to be there.
yeah, and that's indicative of something.
Mhm.
That's indicative of it's not time yet.
Yeah.
I'm not ready yet. There's something holding this divide between you and I, and that's probably there for a reason. And so that's where you don't want to force or, go too fast or things like that.
Yes, I think a lot of you were talking about earlier with conversion disorder and stuff. A lot of people with a high drive for perfectionism have these issues, and I think when you get those people into therapy, we're like, "Oh, this is what I do. Okay, I'm going to do this the best way ever," and that's not the way to heal. Like healing is a lot of just sitting with. Like even if you actually physically injure yourself, like okay, well, you applied antiseptic to it and a bandage, but then you just gotta let it like do what it's gonna do with that information. So yeah,
Yep. Sometimes you just got to put it out there, let it marinate for a bit. And then maybe the next time you come around, or maybe a few times later,
yes,
it's okay. That's all right. That's why the parts show up later. And you
yes,
want to be, I think I talked about that in the beginning of the journal of like, it's not all parts may show up or not all are going to want to participate. That's okay. Like, don't force it. So
definitely. Um, I see some new comments, so I'm gonna look. Someone says, thank you, Dr. Black, for your work on this journal. We're excited to get started. Thank you for hearing systems. And yeah, one of the things that was so apparent to me when I started just reading like the intro and stuff was how much you had listened to systems to get the introduction, the getting started. Like this was definitely an informed piece of work, and it was so apparent in every bit of the layout. So absolutely, thank you. It's a wonderful tool, especially for new systems who are still discovering and learning how to work with their system.
And like I said last time, you know, if you don't have a therapist, I hope that you can hear the way I speak and my words through what I wrote and go back and read it over and over again, especially when you are frustrated or you've hit a roadblock or things like that. Just remember that it's not easy. It does take time. It's worth it. And you do have to pace yourself. So slow is fast. So
I was telling someone just yesterday, it does get easier. Like it does get better. It's hard, especially in the beginning. It's really hard. But like you said, you just pace yourself. You just take what you can a bit at a time. And next thing you know, you look back over your shoulder and you're like, oh my word, like these two alters used to hate each other. This one was always screaming in the background. Like I would lose time and I don't anymore. And, you know, and for me, I was looking back and next thing I knew we were a family. Like these parts where I was just like, I want it to stop. I want it to go away. And the next thing I know, like I love all of them. And it was amazing.
yeah. Yeah, that's what it's all about right there. So
well, is there any more questions, guys? Before we wrap it up, if anyone has some Q&A for us, especially for Dr. Black while we've got her on here, go ahead and leave it in the comments and we will wait for them to update. Let's see. And we have Orange Garden thanking both of us for doing this live. And I really do. I love having you on for a live. It's always so informative, and especially for my followers, just having, because for me, I am telling my lived experience with the disorder, but that's different from someone who has, you know, professional experience, which like you need both. Like for the community needs both to see people with the disorder doing well, like saying you can do this, we got this, and professionals saying you can do this, we got this, and everyone going, here are good tools. Like it's both that's so needed.
yeah. And it'll be posted up on YouTube. So if anyone has any questions, they can always post them later. If they are reflecting, because you know how it is, right?
Yeah.
There's always questions after counseling. You get in the car and you're like, oh, dang it.
Yes. And so for those who are watching it on YouTube, or it posts on YouTube on Monday, so they should be up this coming Monday. Yeah, you can leave questions in the comment section. I read all of those. I will send them on to make sure that Dr. Black sees them, especially if I don't know the answer. I am not, when I don't know the answer, I always go to somebody, because that's the point. Like, not to just be like, oh yeah, sure, I think this sounds right. No, like I ask other systems, I ask other people who will know. So go ahead, leave your questions in the comment section and they will be seen.
And if I don't know, I go ask somebody who knows more than me. There's always somebody else that has a little bit more information or has something different. So
even with my therapist who does like works with people with dissociative disorders, we were talking and she said, yeah, and I'll ask my mentor. And she looked and she was like, you know, that, right? Like I said, oh, absolutely. Like it's such a complex disorder. I expect that your mentor probably has a mentor. So,
My mentor has a mentor too. Yep.
yeah,
We all have mentors.
exactly. Oh, someone asks if I have a Discord. I do. It is connected to my Patreon, but at like the lowest level. So because I didn't want people to not have access to the Discord, but also it's a small, like, really drama-free Discord. So by keeping it within the Patreon, it keeps it that way, so that it's been a very safe group for talking and healing. So I do. You can follow any links in the bio or in the video to my Patreon. And I will also have Dr. Black's links for the journal in my bio. Her dissociative experiences cards is where you'll find it under TikTok, which I suppose I should go rename that link. But for that and for the parts journal, I'll have links as well in the video information. I'm not seeing any questions come through. So is there anything else you want to say before we get off?
Just hang in there. Keep doing it. It'll be worth it.
Exactly that.
All right. Take care, okay?
You too. Yeah, and here, since, yes, I am about that blanket life. Here's my big fuzzy slippers.
I had a client that made this for me, so
oh, that's
very special.
My favorite here. I will show off what this is. My favorite when I'm writing blanket, and it is not a client made, but it is a friend given from Schitt's Creek. So yes, I'm all about it.
Says I'm trying very hard not to connect with people right now.
Exactly.
I love it.
This is my writing blanket. So like I'm being the little writing goblin. I'm just go away, everybody.